All right. So tell the story. You started spitting in Chicago.
So I started spitting in Chicago. Even though I'm from here, I moved there in '92. And so the first place I spit at was at the Cotton Club. And then came home. Had to go to a funeral. One of my friends drugged me to Ebony Square. Had never been, didn't even know they were doing poetry in New Orleans. Went, got on the mic, did something, went back to Chicago. Came back home in '96 and hadn't, done anything or whatever. I think somewhere around that time, Pizzazz started doing floras. So I would scope it out or whatever, but I would never get on the mic and do anything. And then I want to say either 99, 2000, something like that was the first time I ever got on the mic in New Orleans. And had to be in '99 because I was pregnant with my daughter, and there are a few people who remember that. But from that point on, it was just an addiction. So every week you go out, you go to the spot, you go home afterwards so inspired by what you heard. You like scribbling in your notebook, about to have an accident because you're trying to write with the paper on your leg while you're still driving home because you're so inspired. And that was before, we had cell phones with voice memo where we can record it while we're driving and things.
All right. So when you arrived on the scene, who was on the scene? Who were the names like that most not inspired you, but keep it real. Who was on the scene?
Okay.
Who was there?
So at Ebony Square, there was Black Steel. I don't know if you remember this. I don't even know what her stage name is, but her real name is Donica. And a lot of people have forgotten all about Donica. So that was at Ebony Square.
You remember when Consuela was the host?
Yes.
I remember Consuela and what's the black chick name? Shayna. She came when Still left, when Kirk and Still got into it, Shauna came.
Okay.
And she hosted for a little while, and then he found Consuela.
Right. So, it's just, thinking back, but at True Brew, you had Karen and G, Shawan, Wood, you had Sunny, Asali. It was just so much good energy and so many positive vibes in that place. Sadi. We could go on and on and on and on forever with, how many amazing poets, hit the mic. Peter Muhammad. The list goes on and on.
So you've been on the scene a while, so a long, long time. Like, what was your favorite spot like to go to?
Wow. It would have to be a toss-up between True Brew and Hard Rock. Just the energy you got from the audience in those two places, were so incredibly soulful. And it's something that no matter how hard anybody ever tried, you would never be able to duplicate it. It was just a natural, organic, raw energy that flowed through the place. You look at True Brew, you have musicians who have volunteered their time to be there to back up poets. That doesn't happen now. If we call musicians, they want us to pay them. So it was like at that time, everybody had a common vision and a common goal that was never spoken. It was just understood that this is what we're doing to try to build, uplift, the community. Uh-huh. And it was a collective effort.
All right. So tell me your poetry story after you came in '96 and started spitting. What happened next?
So the week by week thing, of course, I would continue to come out and got involved with, a couple of things. I did a project. It was myself, EL3, Boss, Thunder, Ira, this keyboardist, Nucelle Bolton, and Danielle Edinburgh. I think her last name is Wilson now. We all did a project for Black History at Neighborhood Gallery. And
I forgot about the Neighborhood Gallery.
Where everybody did their feature back then. If you had a one-man show or a book release or a CD release, everybody did it at Neighborhood Gallery. But it was such an amazing experience. And the funny story about that is we would practice in my apartment. And I lived like in between, I had neighbors. Let's just leave it at that. And so I knocked on my neighbors' doors, let them know we would have rehearsal. And Boss wrote a song for us that was in Swahili. And so you just imagine you in there, ayara, beating the djembes. We have tambourines, and we singing this song in Swahili. And the next day, one of my neighbors came. We walk into our cars together. She said, "I don't mean to pry or offend, but do you practice voodoo?" So it was just really funny. But from there, it was like different things started happening. You know, a lot of poets did Mr. Herb's play, The Motherland, before they came. And I mean, that was an amazing experience within itself because, you know, we did that play at the Mahalia Jackson Theater. And how many poets can say that they've had an opportunity to perform and do a play at the Mahalia Jackson Theater? You know, I mean, and it was a collective of poets who put that on, and everyone who was there was enlightened and inspired. I mean, it told the story from, you know, being in the motherland to, you know, falling into captivity, the Middle Passage, slavery, all the way to, you know, the announcement of freedom that we now commemorate with Juneteenth. You know, so from there, I mean, shortly, a few years after that, then came Katrina. And it was just so crazy because I was, the Friday before Katrina, while everybody was at True Brew, I was in a studio wrapping up a poetry CD. That drowned with Katrina. And so, you know, like just thinking about that and how I wanted to be there so bad, I was trying to wrap that project up so I could hurry up and get to True Brew because, you know, that was our home. And didn't make it that last Friday before the storm, just like bothered me for so long. And so when we had the reunion show after Katrina, somewhere downtown, I don't even remember where it was, but we had that reunion show and everybody like came in and seeing everybody that you hadn't seen in so long, you know. And then there was another show at Dreams and going to that show and then seeing more people who couldn't make it to the first show and just watching, you know, the scene slowly rebuild and slowly come back. You know, it's just been an amazing experience to be a part of both what's now known as, you know, the pre-Katrina poets and the post-Katrina poets. To be a part of both, it's really just a phenomenal experience because I see what's growing and what's happening, but knowing what was as well, you know.
So tell me about Right Nola.
So Right Nola was actually the idea of Shakandria Icon Sibley. And she went to Asia Rainey, you know, with her idea, what have you. And then they came to me and like, okay, let's work together. Let's try to make this happen. And so we started first just fleshing out our ideas. You know, what the workshops would be called, what they would entail.
But what is Right Nola?
What is Right Nola?
What is Right Nola? That's it.
So Right Nola was a spoken word and poetry festival. And what it encompassed was workshops for our poets to hone our craft and become better. And then there was a town hall meeting where we could voice our opinions and talk about things that we felt were important, especially during that time because there was such a gap between the pre-Katrina and the post-Katrina poets. And a lot of the post-Katrina poets didn't even know a lot of the pre-Katrina poets who moved away. So one of the goals that we had was to make sure that we brought a lot of those pre-Katrina poets back to the city for Right Nola so that we could have this merger of the two poets and kind of like a meet and greet so everybody could get to know each other and see what was here before. You know, kind of like, I guess because those of us who had been here, we had such a respect and high regard for a lot of the pre-Katrina poets. We felt that some of the post-Katrina poets didn't have that same respect. And so to introduce them, you know, to these poets and help them acquire that same level of respect that we had was very important. And that was a large part of, you know, the foundation of where Right Nola came from. You know, as the years went on, it grew. So then the next year we decided to add another component to it, which was the Right Nola Awards. And so, you know, from there we went from having workshops to, you know, having the town hall meeting and now having awards and as well as slams. And in the second year of Right Nola, we had a youth slam, we had an adult slam. People were given, you know, cash prizes, publishing contracts, or what have you. And then for the Right Nola Awards, I mean, everybody who won an award got $1,000. So to profit for this art that you work so hard for and have your peers recognize you, as, someone who was award worthy amongst them, is a very, very high honor, to be recognized by your peers. So, yeah, I mean, that was pretty much the premise of Rhinola. I mean, and again, even with that, we accomplished some amazing things to have the Rhinola Festival housed in Gallier Hall. The first year of Rhinola, we did the culminating activity, which was the Rhinola Showcase at, the Howling Wolf. And, to bring so many poets together, we had about 150 poets attend Rhinola the first year. And this was both pre-Katrina and post-Katrina poets. I remember when I finally got a phone call, and I've been trying to get with Karen Blessed Wilson through I don't know how many different avenues, and when I finally got a phone call from her saying she was coming, I was in my bed damn near asleep, and I jumped up out of my bed screaming and hollering, because to me it was so important that the newer poets just had an interaction with Karen, just to feel her energy, her spirit, see who she is. And then there's some you see poets who remind you of other poets. And we had a couple of poets where just the way they spit kind of remind me of Karen. It was like, you really need to meet her. So it was just, it was an awesome experience to be able to bring those poets together.
Favorite poets post Katrina. Let's start there. Let's start post.
Oh God, post Katrina.
And since you're an elder in the community,
okay, right? Really putting me on the spot.
I ain't, this will be edited, so don't worry about
so, all right, favorite poets post Katrina would have to be Hero, John L, Akeem. Even though she's new to the scene, Frequency. Just an amazing sister. Tank. Casey Filson. Post Katrina. Bree. Smut.
Yeah.
Indy Wrights.
Yeah.
And who's moved from singing now to doing poetry. I mean, and it's just off the chain with their poems, would have to be Karen Green.
I heard she's doing but she was doing poetry before, so yeah, that's cool.
So I would say that's post Katrina. That's probably my tops.
What's the biggest difference, or did you see between pre and post? Or what are some of the differences? Not just the biggest. Okay. What are some of the differences you see?
In pre-Katrina, even though we had, even though it was cliquish, everybody worked together collectively. Any goal that came up, people worked collectively together to try to make it happen. And the spirit of community was so heavily involved and enveloped in that pre-Katrina era. And I find that it's trying to get there in the post-Katrina era, but that would be the biggest difference. The lack of unity. It's not as unified as it could be. Probably one of the other differences would be, venues. Pre-Katrina, we had a venue every night of the week except Saturday. And the joke was always, Saturday was the Poetry Sabbath. And that's the day when, if people wanted to have special shows, book releases, CD releases, or whatever, they would book them on Saturdays. Because we knew every other day of the week there was a poetry venue. And now to hear poets, I don't have time to do poetry, every day. And I'm like, where did this come from? Because we did poetry every day of the week except Saturday, and it was cool.
How you do it? That's how you do poetry.
Right,
you do it every day. You ain't a poet sometimes. You're a poet every day.
Right. So to hear that, it's I don't see the same level of passion that poets had then to progress the art forward. But the flip side is I see people doing bigger things. We just did the Golden Mike Summit and Awards. And to have poets come out, everybody dressed up for this awards program that was voted for exclusively only by New Orleans poets, and have people receive, their awards that looks like, a microphone or what have you, and everybody get up and do their acceptance speech. And it was real Grammy-ish. It was a really wonderful experience. And then for poets, poetry on the beach. You get a whole bunch of poets and, their followers or what have you to go to Mandeville across the lake, where if you ask people to go to the West Bank to a poetry show, they have a problem driving across the river. But everybody drove across the lake and went to Mandeville and, hung out for poetry on the beach. I mean, that's an amazing feat. That's something we haven't been able to do in pre-Katrina. And then to have, our poets, go to the New Orleans Arena and do poetry at the arena. I mean, who does that? And know that next year we'll do the World Poetry Festival in Champion Square. So I see the bigger things that are happening. And ironically, those big things that started to happen only began to happen after the community began to unify. And everybody started coming together, working collectively as one to make it happen. And so then you start seeing the bigger things start to pull together. And I mean, to have the general manager at the arena say, we would be happy to write a letter of recommendation for you all for anything that you want to do, speaks volumes. And it shows that doors aren't just opening. Doors are opening and we're walking through them. You see the doors open, the windows open, the roof come off, the floor cave in. You're pretty much just in a house with studs at this point, because everything is just opening up that much, but only because we're working together.
Yeah, that's deep. Let's see. Poetically Speaking. Is that it?
Poetically Speaking.
Yeah, poetically.
So, how did Poetically Speaking Publishing Group come about? I had so many poems, and it had always been my desire to do a book. A part of it, I think, was just me being, I think it was like I think I had like a psychoanalytic block or something, because the Friday before Katrina, I was working on a CD, and then a CD drowned. And so I never really wanted to go back into a recording studio again. And so I decided, looking at all the poems, I was like, you know what, I'll compile these and I'll do a book. And when I put the information out there to different publishing companies, I had a lot of offers. But a lot of offers that encompassed rape. Where these publishing companies want to retain the rights to your poems pretty much. And then they want to pay you 20% of the proceeds from the sales of your book, while they retain 80%, which was insane to me. And then they want an astronomical amount of money on the front end. So me thinking that I'm a relatively intelligent person, figured I can do this myself. I don't really need a big publishing company to do this. I can self-publish. And as I started thinking about it, the first thought that came to my mind was, what if this book sells like way better than I expected to, and I'm doing this under my personal name? It's going to push me into another tax bracket. So the first thing I decided to do was start my own publishing company, and I would publish the book under that publishing company. And so post-Katrina, probably in 2007, I hosted a show at the Juju Bag called Poetically Speaking. And so I just decided to keep that name and name the company Poetically Speaking Publishing Group. And it ended up being the best move for me. I mean, I taught myself everything I needed to know, from how to lay the cover out, doing the layout and stuff on the inside, getting the copyrights, the ISBN, the barcode for your ISBN, what have you. Learned all of those procedures, and then decided that it would be senseless for me to have all this knowledge and just hold it to myself. So from there, I opened it up to other poets, about working with their books or what have you. Even if they didn't want me to publish, then I would edit, lay out their books for them. I did Eddie Kane's book. I recently finished Mac Dennis's book. I have 2 poets whose books I'm working on now, and also a minister whose book I'm working on, and I have a young lady whose novel I'm working on. So we have quite a few projects going on right now with Poetically Speaking. But what we do is we don't retain the rights to anybody's book. So when you publish with Poetically Speaking, you retain all of the rights to your book yourself. The copyright is in your name. It just lists, Poetically Speaking as your publisher. That way, when I purchased the ISBN, I purchased the ISBN in the name of whoever the client